interesting conversation. I know we have a lot of hot competition with the other stages, so really glad that you chose to join this one. So I have so many questions for this panel. I know I'm never going to have enough time, so we'll get straight into it. But first of all, my name is Susan Dwyer. I'm the founder and CEO of Rise Up. We're a community platform designed to empower women in their careers. So as you can imagine, today's topic, women in leadership, is something that I'm personally super passionate about, and I'm always so curious to learn from new perspectives. So excited to dig into today's topic. I'm also glad to see, we were saying before we came up here, I wonder what the representation will be between female and male. And looking around, female is dominating, but I'm glad to see some male representation here today, because that's super important. So what are we going to talk about today? First off, we're going to dig deep into leadership and leadership philosophy and what good leadership looks like, and also what it's like to be a female leader in tech. And then we're going to dive into diversity, equity, and inclusion and talk a little bit about how can we be more inclusive as an industry so that everyone feels like they have a role to play in tech. So without further ado, I'm joined by Dorothy Creaven, who's the Managing Director and VP of Runway. Then we have Renee Hawkins, who is COO at Thoughtworks UK. And then we have Nikki Lasley, who's Head of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Amplitude. So Renee, I'm going to start with you. Talk to us a little bit about your relationship with failure and how this has helped develop you as a leader today.
Absolutely. I think this is really important for all the women in the audience. I know oftentimes women, we tend to be perfectionists, but I think I've learned the most in my career from my failures. An example of that is I had my son in 2013. He was born, and I was asked to come back early to work to be the head of operations for the UK business. And I did. I came back after 6 months of maternity leave, and it wasn't really working for me, and it wasn't working for the business. And I really felt like I failed, and I lost the only opportunity I was ever going to have to grow my career when I decided that that role wasn't right for me. But I was able to step away from that role, and I was able to kind of connect with my core values and what I wanted for me, for my family, and for my career. And then through that, I was able to continue to pursue different roles. And now, look at me now. I'm the COO of the business, so I'm doing that operational role at even a higher level. So I think failure is important to learn and to reconnect with yourself.
And Dorothy, I might go to you next. So there's two images over the last year that have really kind of stuck in my mind. One image is the picture of Whitney Wolford, the CEO of Bumble, in the NASDAQ building, IPOing her company with her baby on her hip. And I think just that sent like a huge, powerful message around women being able to do both, and that you don't have to choose. But the second image that I want to talk to you about is the image of the picture that went viral of the Runway all-female leadership team IPOing earlier this year. And again, I just think it was an image that not many of us have seen before. And so my question to you is, what lessons have you learned being part of such a strong leadership team? And what's your own personal philosophy on leadership and what good leadership looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the image you're referring to is probably the image of like our COO, our CEO, and CFO. So it's the first female-led company that has IPO'd. So that was a huge moment in history, and it was 12 years in the making of the history of our company as well. Our CEO, Jen, always had that vision that she wanted the company to IPO, and then having such a strong female leadership team as well. Over 75% of our executive team is female, and it was an extremely striking image for sure. I think it's been incredibly inspiring to be part of a team which has so much diversity in its leadership, and that's leadership at all levels. So in Ireland, we're a software engineering office. I run an R&D centre in Galway for any engineers out there. It's an amazing place to be based. and our leaders from every level, and that's like from engineering managers to directors to VPs, all the way up to the executive team in New York. They've really shown us all how to lead from the front, and that actually we're all leaders. You don't need to be very senior in your career to be a leader. So we really embody that in all of our employees, how we give feedback, through our, biannual cycles. And we really encourage people just to step forward and use their voice at every opportunity, and that could be at a team meeting, at a daily stand-up, it could be at an SLT, a senior leadership meeting, because it's really important for every voice to be heard at the table, from every type of aspect, because everyone has a different perspective, and having the same person give us the same, voice only gives one perspective. So I think leading from the front and being authentic and being like a true leader is, really looking after your people firstly, if you're a people manager, but also encouraging others to really step forward and lead from the front.
Brilliant. And I'm going to go to you next, Nikki. So we were talking about this earlier, but as a leader, and particularly as a female leader, do you think you get the support that you need to thrive as a leader? Because often, we talk about mentorship and supporting kind of earlier stage people in their careers, and sometimes I think there's not enough focus on supporting leaders in their journey. So my question is, do you think, what has your experience been around where do you get that support to, because it can result in burnout, it can result in women dropping out of the workforce, which we've seen over the last 2 years, and we can't afford to lose women and drop out of the workforce. So tell us a little about your experience with that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. My personal philosophy is that as a leader and as you continue to grow and develop in your career, that you should really think about your network. And for me, I've created my personal board of directors, which I call my support team. They're thought leaders. They are peers in the industry, some more senior than me, some actually more junior than me, but we collectively work to support each other during these, especially over the last 2 years, has been really critical. But identifying folks that are either in your network or you want in your network to really be able to help think through problems, think through what your path might be going forward, people who've been on those paths, or people who are really trying to reinvent the path. There's an opportunity to really leverage people who are doing this work with you, maybe in other companies or even other industries that can be really supportive. So my one piece of advice would be to identify your personal board of directors and stay close with them as you go and grow through your career.
Brilliant, thank you. And Renee, I might ask the same question to you around, something that we hear a lot in the Rise Up community is burnout, and women really struggling to, I suppose, manage both worlds, personal and career. What's your experience been of that, and how have you avoided over the years being in these, influential leadership positions?
Yeah. So I think that, setting an example as a leader is really important for the rest of the business as well. When I came back from my second maternity leave, I came back to a part-time role, and I gradually moved into a full-time role. And, when women sought advice from me when they were coming back from maternity leave, I said, use your accrued annual leave and give yourself some flexibility to come back into the workforce. And, knowing that I had done it, that gave them the confidence that they could go do it again. I set pretty strict boundaries on myself about, hours that I turn off the laptop, and I spend that quality time with my 2 kids and family. And, the work will get done, or you learn to delegate. I've learned to delegate a lot more now than I have ever had in the past, so that I can create, that space for myself. And you've got to find the right pattern for you. I love to be at events like this, and it means you're away for a period of time, but then you find that way to balance and compensate. So I think that, relying on others and having that communication channel between you and your team to make sure that you're keeping an eye out for people as well, because you've got to watch out for others on burnout, particularly now. We're mostly remote, and, people do have a tendency to sit in the chair all day long and do back-to-back Zoom calls, and it's not sustainable. So making sure you're checking in with your team members and finding that space for them as well is important.
Brilliant. And Dorothy, I want to talk a little bit about change and I suppose, this term of being an agent of change or a change agent. And sometimes you hear, particularly with people working in very large global organizations, maybe at a junior or, not at a leadership level, they might struggle to figure out, okay, well, how can I implement change in such a large organization? Do you have any advice for people in the audience who might be in that situation, where to start or what actions could they take around implementing change or even starting that discussion?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of mentorship. So I think pairing with a mentor at every stage in your career is incredibly important. If you're lucky enough to work in a company that has a mentorship program that makes it so easy, you can sign up and get matched to somebody who has a skill set that you're maybe trying to leverage. But you can also do it informally. I am a big fan of just reaching out to people. People reach out to me, and it's like, hey, can I get like 10 minutes of your time? I'm like, well, let's do 30 minutes. Let's just, see what you do want to get out of this. And actually, just having more of an informal mentor in a couple of different people. It kind of almost goes back to the board of directors point, where you're actually handpicking a few people that you can really bounce ideas off. But I think to really have change be effective, it's almost like you need to kind of go out there and start talking to a number of different people about your idea, get feedback on the idea, and then probably potentially iterate on your idea, or if everyone is in agreement, then everybody has the same message. And I think, having a message come from multiple different sources and multiple different channels ends up being a lot more powerful than one person trying to push a big boulder up the hill. So I would just say, talk to loads of people, get out there, get to know people. Ultimately, it's all about how we all connect with each other, the community. It's really healthy to have debate. We don't have to agree with each other all the time, and that's really, really good for encouraging change and conversations about change.
Brilliant. And Nikki, I might ask you this one. One of my favorite quotes when it comes to diversity and inclusion is, because I think it sums it up just really perfectly, diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. And often I think diversity can get a lot more airtime than inclusion. And really, one doesn't work without the other, because if you hire diverse talent, okay, brilliant, but if they don't feel like they belong and they leave a couple of months into the role, it's counterproductive. So, tech as an industry, there's a lot of disparities there. What can we do, practically, whether it's C-suite or as an individual, to make the tech industry more inclusive for everybody?
Yeah, we have, as an industry or as a company, and my personal philosophy is that everything starts with inclusion. The diversity sort of comes as a result of creating an inclusive environment and making sure that things are equitable. But if you don't have the inclusion piece first and really have that culture set that you're making space for everyone, then you're not going to be successful in the overall DEI strategy. For us, and our CEO, Spencer, who was just on the stage right before this, will say, he's super committed to this, and he has mandated that all of our leaders, everybody who reports to him and everyone the next level down, is required to be a part of some diversity initiative. Either it's our executive sponsors for our employee resource groups, it's a mentoring program, it's leading initiatives. If we have specific hiring initiatives, that they show up and sort of set the tone for us being truly inclusive. And the other thing is we have rolled out 10 employee resource groups since I've been there in the last year, and really created opportunities for folks to connect on a number of different levels, whether it's neurodiversity or if it's a cultural area that we're learning about. We just had a really great Pride bingo, drag bingo last week that was a huge hit in our office. So it was really about learning about different cultures and experiences, and that is how you create that sense of inclusion, because you're like, oh, there's space for me, and this traditionally, can be a bro-y tech culture. We have really kind of flipped that on its head and started with how do we make room for everyone. If anyone has an interest in in an employee resource group or an activity that we want to do, we are open to that and letting folks sort of create the spaces that represent the people who are with us.
Amazing. And Renee, I might ask you a similar question around, you know, what does inclusion mean to you, and how has that transpired in Thoughtworks and developed over the years?
Yeah, I mean, so Thoughtworks, I think I actually grew a lot of my understanding of oppression and different types of society through Thoughtworks. So I joined Thoughtworks 18 years ago, and we were owned by a gentleman named Roy Singham, who was an activist, and he was really passionate about bringing that equality and inclusion to society and using tech for good. And that was a long time ago that we were thinking about this. So I think that for me, that inclusivity has been a part of how I grew up in the business. And what we've focused on is really a lot of education. We have a number of different affinity groups, so quite similar to what Nikki is speaking of. And the different affinity groups take the opportunity to educate the rest of the business on, what are the Jewish holidays and why are they important to, the folks that are Jewish. And we do a lot of activities around Black at Thoughtworks, and what does it mean to be Black in society? We have an office in the US as well as in the UK, and as many of you know, the US isn't as forthcoming with, racial equality. There's a lot of inequality there. So I think, part of it is just that education. And we also screen in our employee hiring process. We screen for openness. So we ask folks to come to the interviews and present a topic that they're passionate about. And we have a debate during the interview process. And I think it's amazing just because you get to see what is firing in that person, what's their passion. And we want to attract passionate technologists, not just people that are passionate about technology, but people that are passionate about society and about change. So I think it starts from that entry level. It's probably the ethos of the business, and similar to Nikki, I sponsor our race and ethnicity affinity group, and part of my role is to really advocate for folks in the business. So it's about thinking about, one of the things we learned in doing a survey is that folks who are of a different race don't feel they have the equal opportunities in our company, which is shocking and something we need to do about. So it's understanding, well, how is that, and how can we be more inclusive and open up those roles for everyone? Yeah.
Brilliant. And Dorothy, so I speak to a lot of tech companies around ERG groups and what they're doing around this, and often I find that it's like one volunteer who's running these groups, often a woman, and they're almost trying to convince C-suite or leadership to get involved and give them budget, and it can be a real challenge. And I suppose my question is, in your eyes, like, how important is it for this to be led from the top and for C-suite to be really involved and really care about these initiatives?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So in Rent the Runway, culture is one of our absolute non-negotiables. Being a very open, having very open and inclusive type culture. So we advocate for bringing your best self to work, your whole self to work, and that was there well before I started the company, and that comes from the top down, absolutely. We also have employee resource groups. It's not just one woman waving a flag. It's literally everybody gets involved. Everybody's encouraged to get involved, and they want to get involved because of the energy that's there in those groups. And I think sometimes it can be maybe daunting if you're the only person who wants to start a group in maybe a smaller company. But I have to say my experience of Rent the Runway has been absolutely phenomenal. I love to see so many people get together. They also advocate for others when they're not in the room, and that's from every facet of life. And it kind of follows on from my what I mentioned earlier about mentorship. I'm a big believer in finding sponsors. So a mentor is somebody you meet with at a certain cadence. You bounce ideas off them. They give you some feedback, and all happy days. A sponsor is somebody who will advocate for you when you're not in the room. A sponsor will open doors for you. They will invite you to those meetings. They will talk about you to other people who can give you that opportunity. And all of us here should be and need to be sponsors for people in our lives, because everybody needs a bit of help. I need help. Everybody does. And I think that's the real difference is, like, you have your mentor group, you have your board of directors, go find a sponsor, because that will also give you the energy sometimes when you may not have it, because sometimes it does take a lot of energy to keep kind of, as I say, using your elbows all the time.
Yeah, and it's funny because I feel like mentorship gets talked about a lot, but you don't really hear much about sponsorship.
Yeah.
And there might be a lack of understanding what the difference is. So I'm glad you kind of made that differentiation. And Nikki, I might reframe that question a little bit to you, because I know you do a lot of work in this space. Like, what is the risk that companies are taking by not having C-suite involved in these decisions? Like, what's the danger or the potential impact for companies?
Well, we've seen it across the industry. You know, this, I would say it's partially a generational shift, but it's also just a mindset shift that folks want to work at a place that is inclusive. They want to work for companies that care and have a point of view about making the world somewhat of a better place in whatever the aspect that they choose to sort of put their stakes in the ground. If companies don't do that, and CEOs who will remain nameless have made statements that are sort of antithetical to that, people leave. And in this environment, we're all looking for top talent, and it's definitely an employee's market in terms of being able to pick up and go. And people are, I'm so impressed that you've been at your job for 18 years. But we have people moving around so much, so the risk is that you lose that top talent, that people will walk away because they want to go to a company that has those values and that will really truly live those values as well.
Yeah, and that's a really good point about it is an employee's market right now, and it is super competitive, and, you know, all tech companies are searching for that top talent. So Renee, like, do you have any advice for any hiring managers or a C-suite in the audience around how do you manage to attract diverse talent, or what strategies have worked for you in the past?
Yeah, so I think one of the top things is, you know, as a business, you have to have a purpose, as Nikki was talking about. And one of the activities we did recently as a business was, what is the Thoughtworks why, and why do we exist, and what are the 5 pillars that we stand by, and also what are the values that we believe in. And I think that by having that as a business and by living through that, you do attract candidates, because you're not just talking the talk, you're actually walking the walk. So I think that's hugely important. You know, the folks that are going to be interviewing candidates need to have those values, live by those values, and also, you know, understand the purpose of the business. Because, you know, you want to go to work every day not just to generate some money for the company. You want to go to work every day because you're making a difference in the world and through the work that you do. So I think that's number one as a business, and then make sure that all your employees believe in that, and then they're going to be talking about that in the interviews and really attracting the candidates. I think you also have to be incredibly intentional about how you source candidates. So sourcing is a massive part of it. It's not just putting up a job advert and seeing who applies. It's about going out and, you know, stalking LinkedIn and finding the people that you want from the diverse backgrounds, and attending the right, you know, community and meetup events that have the right diversity of candidate that you're looking for, and, you know, not stopping at saying, oh, well, these are just the people that applied. That's not good enough. Particularly, I'll use an example is, you know, sales. So we have a large demand and sales team in the business, and you see less women in that line of work. But we've been really intentional about how we're going to market for those roles and how we're sourcing candidates. Because we're not going to take, you know, 3 men coming in for the role. We need at least a little bit more diversity in that. So we have rules around, you know, the starting point for any interview has to have a diverse candidate base. Obviously then, the best candidate wins, but you need that diversity at the start.
And Dorothy, so Galway is the engineering hub, am I right, for Rent the Runway. Engineering is notoriously a very male-dominated discipline. How do you manage to keep it as diverse as possible when hiring, when looking at retention? What strategies have worked there in the past for you, or are working, or what are some of the challenges maybe that you find in the market?
Yeah, so in Galway we're a software engineering base, and we also have engineers in our New York office. And we have, I think, over 40% of our, engineering or tech team is female. So we are very conscious about how we hire as well. Having a diverse interview panel, we do tons of interview training. If you have the same people interviewing this like all the time for the same roles, then you're only going to end up hiring the same people. I think unconscious bias is something. I mean, it's named unconscious for a reason. So there has to be very intentional training around unconscious bias and actually being able to identify questionable patterns either in yourself, ideally, and also potentially looking out for them with your work colleagues, and they can be addressed in a really, positive way as well. So I think looking to see, also who is your customer base? Like our customer base are predominantly females that are based in the US, and I mean, we don't want to aim our product only at one type of female, it's for everybody. So I think having that in our staff is also really important. We don't want to hire only women. We don't want to only hire people who know our product really well. We need to hire from all sorts of backgrounds, ages, abilities, disabilities, like everything in the remit. And I think the job description part is also something that's extremely important. So often you'll find, like, when women look at a job description, they have to hit 100% of the skills that are required, whereas men, they say it's more like 60 to 70%, which is fantastic. But I think we also need to encourage women. And then the sourcing piece, as Renee mentioned, like being intentional and saying, hey, listen, you look really interesting. Your profile looks extremely interesting. You have amazing career history. And often you get, oh, but I don't have like all the skills. And it's like, no, come to the table, be part of the conversation, and believe in yourself and give yourself the best opportunity as well. And, going back to the sponsors and mentors, like having somebody to kind of give you a little bit of a nudge when you need it is helpful too.
And Dorothy, you made a really good point there around unconscious bias. And Nikki, I might ask you, do you think this should start with the individual, or is it more of a company's responsibility to provide training for this, or where does one even start with becoming more self-aware with their own biases? Because we all have them, but it's about recognizing what they are. So what's your...
My short answer is yes, it's all the things. We have really tried to embed unconscious in all of our DI learning. We have a whole learning journey path. It's embedded in everything you do. So from the very beginning in your onboarding and through the enablement of learning our product, like how do we talk about it, how do we think about it when we're having customer calls, where do those biases come in? And then from the top, the leadership, like I said, are very involved. So they helped us build out like what are the biases in the specific industries. We had some specific ones in sales, some different ones in engineering. So they worked with us to really identify those, and then we created a program that we could roll out. But as part of that effort with our employee resource groups and the communities that we have created internally, we've really had our individual contributors identify specific areas and tools and things that have worked for them. So it really has been both a top-down and a bottom-up initiative within the company for us to really address biases. And microaggressions is sort of a subset of that, and so that's where the individual contributor can really provide a perspective, especially we have folks from all over the world in our company, and so how folks engage can be really culturally different, and it may be taken as a microaggression or a slight, or it may be just a communication style. So having folks from those different representations to be able to speak to that is one of the things that has really helped us embed that work in our DI learning efforts.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think with the time that we live in now and remote work, it presents amazing opportunities, but it also presents new challenges, which we're all trying to figure out and navigate. Renee, just with the theme of inclusion, is that more difficult to obtain when we're all separated and we're all working from home, or how are you experiencing that right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the pandemic has definitely opened up more opportunities for women to be able to do the juggle of family and work. I know that was, for myself, I benefited. I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I've built stronger relationships with them through the pandemic than I think I ever would have had I had been on the crazy rat race that we were running before. So I think that's really important. But I think that, hybrid is key, because there is still something about, connecting, having conversations, networking. I mean, networking on Zoom doesn't really work very well. It's that in person. It's the ability to go have a coffee or have a chat in the kitchen or the canteen. So I think those are really important. And I think as women, it's, I think it's finding that balance of hybrid that works for you as well as for your business is important. And I think networking in general is really key. And networking outside your own company, it's quite easy to network within your company, but then finding the courage to ask someone for advice or for a conversation. I had someone recently just ping me on LinkedIn and say, hey, you want to meet for lunch in London? And I said yes. And she's like, I'm really surprised you said yes. I said, of course I said yes. And she was just looking for advice and to build her, her women's senior leader network. I've learned something from her, and she learned something from me. So don't be afraid to ask. Reach out there. Women want to help women. We want to be there for everyone.
Brilliant. And with 2 minutes to go, I'm going to finish with one question, and I'd like everyone to try and answer it if we can. There's no doubt about it. We need more women in tech. We need more female leaders in tech. There's so many decisions being made when there's no woman in the room, and this has consequences. So for anyone in the audience who is trying to either break into tech for the first time or navigate their way into a leadership position, what would you say to them? Dorothy, I'll start with you.
I am a big stalker on LinkedIn. I think go find 3 people that you want to talk to, and maybe, all 3 will come back to you. Maybe you get 1 meeting out of it, but aim for 3, aim for more, depending on your hit rate. Maybe you need to work on your messaging if people aren't necessarily coming back to you. But really be genuine with your message, I think. People get so many messages on LinkedIn, and it generally can be quite salesy. But if you're really honest and you're asking for help, I guarantee you people will be more inclined to respond and actually volunteer their time.
Great, I love that. And the same question to you, Nikki.
Yeah. Put yourself out there. You are enough as is. Women always feel the need, and I'm definitely a victim of this, to be 110% when your counterpart may be at 70%. It's kind of what Dorothy was saying earlier in terms of jobs. Put yourself out there. Have the courage to say, I'm good enough and I can do this now. So that's what I would say.
And finally, Renee, I'll let you answer.
Yeah, quickly. So getting into tech, one of the things that we've done at Thoughtworks is we've started to hire career changers. And those are folks that go through a dedicated coding boot camp. So they may have 6 weeks of experience. But they also, because we're a consultancy, they have real life experience as well in another career. And I've found that the trajectory for folks coming through the career changes has been outstanding. So yeah, career changing is something to look into.
Amazing. Well, that's a wrap. We are out of time, but I want to thank you so much for sharing your perspectives, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you.